Agencies Drinking Beer is brought to you by Proposify, software that helps you deliver beautiful proposals in the cloud and close more deals.
Welcome to the 46th episode of Agencies Drinking Beer. On today's show, we're talking to James Carbary from Sweetfish Media, and he's going to teach agency owners how to use local podcasts to build relationships, nurture leads, and close deals. So, we have an interview coming up soon, but before we do that, we actually have a great question from a listener. So we want to answer that for you guys here on the show. So first off, I'll read the question from Tricia, which is my mother's name, by the way. Thought you might like to know that. Her question is, "Hi, Kyle. This article is..." Oh, no, she's talking about something else. Okay, I'll get right to the question. She said, "I'm used to working with small businesses, but lately some large public sector organizations have approached me, and I have concerns that could affect pricing and working with these different organizations. For example, the expectations around number of meetings and dealing with different types of bureaucracy that isn't as seen as frequently in small business. And there's policies and procedures that have to be understood and followed in a more structured environment. Those are some things I can guess will influence pricing, but to what extent I'm not sure. Then there will be other unforeseen issues that come up that might compromise a project or derail it, and I'm trying to brainstorm and learn from others to help avoid problems. Do you have any comments about these concerns since you have worked with public sector organizations?" So,
and how'd she know we worked with public service?
We might have mentioned that in a blog post. I think it was the one where we talked about the Department of Education.
Oh, yes, okay.
So Kevin and I brainstormed ourselves and came up with a few takeaways that hopefully will help Tricia and anybody else considering taking on larger public sector government type clients. So why don't you kick it off for us, Kevin?
Well, the whole theme is cover your butt.
Yes.
Really, if you think about it, that's the bottom line.
In fact, when we were brainstorming these ideas, I drew a butt on the whiteboard.
Yes, you did.
Because I'm mature.
Inspiring. Yes, cover your butt. Get a great lawyer. Make sure that the bottom line is covering the scope of the project. I mean, that's the overarching message that we have. And we have 5 things we've spelled out here. So, of course, covering your butt, pay for a good lawyer, don't skimp, right?
Yep. I think that it's worth, if you really think that you're going to get this project, and we can go over ways that you might know that easier later on, but if you really think you're going to get the project, it makes sense to get your lawyer. You should hopefully have a standard contract that a lawyer's already done up for you, but maybe even get them to do it up. Maybe not even at the proposal stage. Maybe it's only after your client accepted your proposal that you then go through getting the contract signed. That's usually the way it works. They don't sign it right off the bat.
But, there's that word again, but they often have their own contract. Let's face it, they do not want to use your contract. And to get the project, sometimes, a lot of times you have to use what they have. So you have to, again, have a lawyer look it over. And that can take so much time. Time and money. I mean,
you do have to get a lawyer to look over their contract. But I think every time I say
that damn word,
I'm going to look at my picture. You can't have a negotiating between two parties. This is the problem: is that the government organization thinks that that they are the ones in control. They're the clients, and they have the money, and they can pick and choose whoever they want. You don't want to abide by my terms, then no, we'll find someone else. Then fuck those guys. Go get a better client. If the client can't be like, okay, we've got our terms. Well, you've got your terms too. Now, how do we work them together? Then that's called negotiating.
Can you tell he's a little jaded?
We had a big client. It was a big university that we had a standard, contract, and they had a contract, and so we just worked with their legal department and we submitted the contract to them, and they worked it in, right?
Yep.
But what we didn't do, is we didn't hire a lawyer to then go over the whole contract once it was done and finalized and give us any, heads up and issues. And actually that project got derailed. It went to shit like a year later. It was a big project. It was going to take a long time. Actually, I think we had a maintenance retainer that was going to be 5 years. It's a long time. We were just poor or stupid to not get the
I remember them pulling little pieces out of little terms and things that they would just skew their own way of terminology and what it meant. Their definition of some of these things was crazy.
Yeah. For instance, like when the contract, I believe, mentioned that there was a budget for some video, right?
Simple video.
And it was very vague, and we intentionally left it vague because it was kind of like they wouldn't tell us how much video they needed, whether it was one video, was it a 2-second, or a 20-second video or a 20-minute long video, like they just didn't know because we hadn't defined it yet.
They did verbally describe it as very simple little snippets.
Right, verbally.
Yes, exactly.
And so
that's the problem.
We left a very vague number in the contract that said it was, X number of dollars. This was our video budget. This was what we could spend on video. And they somehow took that to mean when suddenly all of a sudden they wanted like hundreds of hours of video shot and edited and sound and animation, that suddenly that would just cover it because it's what they need. And we're like, well, we can't do that. It's too small. Well, that's what we need. So lesson learned, get your lawyer to go over that stuff. And, the thing with public sector and government and stuff is you have to be very specific about a lot of things or they're just going to assume that the sky's the limit. So when it comes to meetings or travel, like what was that? Well, you don't have to say the client, but the travel time.
Oh yeah, there was a client, a government client, 5 hours away, and they wanted to have a half-hour meeting. So we said, okay, great, let's do a Skype call. And it was with one of our contractors. And no, you got to drive up here. We have to see you. So we drove 10 hours for a half-hour meeting. And they insisted on it, or they weren't going to pay us.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. And also, to take a step back, basically be very selective when you do see an RFP come through. Tell them that you need to communicate with them. You brought this up. It's a great one. And if they aren't willing to get on the phone with you or meet with you during that process of looking it over and answering your specific questions, and they want to do it as a group, that's a red flag. The specs are, they usually have very vague and high-level specs, especially if it's something that they're not familiar with.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times you get a procurement officer who's just, that's what he does. All he does is procure things. He buys chairs. And so you're dealing with him at the beginning, and he has no idea about the technology or anything you're trying to achieve.
The problem is a lot of RFPs will want you to prescribe the solution in the proposal. They want, you do up the wireframes and the site map and the whole plan and give us the strategy, and that's your proposal. And it's like, that's what you're paying us for. You want us to do the work before we do the work. It's like you hire, you're talking to a carpenter and you'd be like, just go ahead and just build me my deck. And then if I like your deck, then I'll pay you for the deck. But if I don't like it, then I'll just go home.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
We had some success pushing back. And at first, this one particular client was very taken back that we didn't want to respond. And they came back and after our recommendation, which was to pay us for an upfront functional spec document and engagement, like a UX engagement. They did come back, and actually we ended up winning it, the whole project, and it went very smooth because we scoped it out, and then we gave them a price on the development after we scoped it out. But we charged them for it, and they paid for it.
Yeah. So that's like our third takeaway is to sell an upfront discovery process. Because if you've got a big project, and this was, again, our mistake with a number of clients, that we took on projects that were too big, and we tried to just make a lot of assumptions at the beginning about what would be included in the project. And then, of course, things change. But you're not dealing with a small business where they're business people. They understand, yep, things change. Okay, we want more. We got to pay a little bit more. Government doesn't work that way. They want to know every detail of what's going to be in the project before they decide to even go with your company, which is ridiculous. So the only way to really make that sort of work is to say, okay, we're going to do a smaller engagement where you're going to pay us, and we're going to actually figure out what the final solution is going to look like and how detailed, what's going to be included, what are the details. And then once you know that, guess what? You're not even bound to us. You can go and now take this blueprint to another company or put it back out to RFP if you want. Now, the thing is, you're going to be likely to win that if you want it at that point. I think it's the only way to do it.
And then another point here is, ask colleagues that you may know, people in the industry, if they've dealt with this agency, this government agency, or this organization before. Get some recommendations. They may give you the heads up that, hey, these guys are bad news. You'll get real feedback from colleagues you trust.
Mm-hmm. And the last one was to have an internal ambassador. If you can, if it's possible, will always make your life easier.
Yep.
So, for instance, I guess I can think of 2 occasions, but there's probably more, where we had an insider, not in a corrupt way, but it was somebody who worked within the government department or outside of that department who we were friends with, and we could give him a bit of a heads up, or he could give us a heads up over, a new RFP that was coming down the pike, and it's kind of small, so there's not, it doesn't actually have to go to tender. So if you can get it under this budget, you guys can just come in and take the project.
But he wasn't a friend prior, though. I mean, we won our first deals through those guys, and what he liked about us is that we were easy to deal with, and we made his life easier.
Yeah,
because he even bounced ideas for RFPs past us on how he should structure certain things. So
yeah, and his name was the Goo.
Yep, good man.
He was a Goo man. He was a Goo Manchu.
Goo Manchu.
Yeah, it was kind of weird. He had a name that's, I don't know if he wants us to mention his name.
No, don't. But it rhymed.
But we called him Goo because it's a cool name. There's one point that I want to just go back on under the covering your ass with the contract, and because I don't think we talked about this, is about the idea of a delay fee or a kill fee.
That's great, yeah.
This is so important, especially if you deal with government, because if you're dealing with a small business or just any kind of business and they just want the shit done, they want to make money, they want your work to make them money, they don't want to hold things up. They do sometimes, and you push them. Government, it's a whole different world. Government, and I don't mean to generalize what government employees are like, because they're people and they're different. But generally speaking, it's a problem with government is that they're very slow, they're very bureaucratic, which is exactly what was in this person's questions, Trish's questions, is there's more bureaucracy and red tape, and things sometimes slow it down. We once had a client where there was a change in government. There was a different political party taking over in the province, and that delayed a project by 3 months or 6 months. So if you've committed resources to finishing a project and your client just buggers off because of whatever reason, there has to be something in the contract that says, no, you can't just come back 5 years later after you've stopped answering our emails, our phone calls, the project's half done. You can't come back in 5 years and say, okay, now let's finish the project. Nope, you're paying a fee to restart that project, and you're actually going to pay a fee after 90 days if you've just stopped working on the project and stopped being communicative with us.
I remember not getting paid the final payment because they decided to delay the launch. Yeah. It was internal. It was all finished.
Yeah.
But they decided they didn't have the manpower, remember?
Yes.
To completely finish it, so you're not going to get your pay until we launch it.
Yeah. Unbelievable, right?
Yep.
And I would think that most business people, unless they're really evil, would understand that, but I think, yeah.
Do you know what they told me?
What?
Do you remember?
No.
The procurement officer said, well, go sell another website. You guys will be okay. Do you remember that?
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah. Could you imagine? A government, listen, buddy, our tax dollars are paying your friggin' salary.
Yeah, I think some of them, they're very much not entrepreneurial people, and they've probably never done that. Not all, but many haven't. And so I think that sometimes they have this impression that us entrepreneurs are just filthy rich, and they're making their government salary, which is probably not too bad, and they probably get 6 months of vacation a year, but
that's not
they kind of get a little they kind of get a little bit boy, you guys are just rolling in it.
But Trish, you can tell that you hit definitely a thorn for us.
You hit a major nerve.
Yeah.
Oh man,
it was a good question.
This is the first question we've gotten from listeners where we've actually whiteboarded ideas because we're like, okay, what about this?
I know.
What else pisses you off?
Nice.
Yeah. So hopefully, if you are thinking of taking on a government client, you think about all the stuff that we told you, because it can be lucrative, but it can also be a nightmare. And a lot of that depends on how you manage it up front.
Exactly.
Hopefully, you like that. Now, we're going to move on to the interview with James Carbary. I'd like to welcome James Carbary on the show today. James is the founder of Sweetfish Media, and he's based out of Orlando, Florida. And Sweetfish Media helps companies produce niche podcasts for B2B companies. I kind of messed that up, but anyway, welcome to the show, James.
Hey guys, how are you?
Very good.
Great.
As you said earlier, the name of the show, Agencies Drinking Beer, sets the bar really low, so I can screw up intros and nobody cares.
It's totally fine. Totally fine.
Great. Well, you had me on your show a few weeks back, and that was a lot of fun. So it's great that you're trading the favor, and now you're on our show.
Yeah, man, you added a ton of value to our audience. So hopefully I can live up to your to the value bombs that you dropped on our show and help some agency owners out today.
Yeah, that's awesome. Maybe before because we've got a really cool topic. You brought this sort of topic idea about, really how to add $1 million to your sales pipeline in less than 90 days and how to use podcasts and make it location based. But before we really get into that, I just wanted to kind of ask a little bit more about Sweetfish Media and, kind of how you started it, when you started it, and sort of, more about what you guys do for clients.
Yeah, awesome, man. Thanks for asking. So I started Sweetfish about 1.5 years ago, and really, I was working for a tech startup. I was doing business development for them, and their funding dried up. They had to let me go, and I was really putting this kind of fork in the road. Like I can go and try to find another startup gig or a corporate job somewhere, or I'd always had this itch to do something entrepreneurially, and had played in the entrepreneur pond, but had never really dove into the sea, if you will. And so I decided, man, I really want to do this thing. I'm in a position in life where I can. So decided to go for it. And one thing that I had noticed when I was with the tech startup is that, I heard all these people talking about content marketing and how powerful content marketing was. But I firsthand had this experience of but creating this content is just really freaking hard. Who has the time to write these really long, well thought out posts? It's just really hard to do. The stuff that Kyle's putting out for you guys' blog, it just takes a ton of time, and a lot of people just don't have the time to do it, even though they know that it's super impactful and can actually drive, new leads and new business for you. And so I was like, well, I'm going to put together a team of writers, and we're just going to start doing this for people. So we started doing kind of content interviews with business owners, with marketing directors, and we would record their thoughts on, specific topics related to their industry. And then our writing team would write the content for them. So it's essentially like a content marketing shop. And then last October, so about 6-7 months ago, I started trying out a strategy where we were trying to go after a specific vertical. And so I launched a podcast that was a niche podcast dedicated to serving people in that vertical. And my thought was, if I start this podcast, it's going to position me to connect with my ideal clients by featuring them as guests on the show. And I know that once I have a relationship with them, it's going to be much easier for me to sell them on our service, which at the time was this, content marketing service. And so I launched that podcast and realized very quickly that I went from getting, we had been doing cold email campaigns before, and we were getting, 12 to 15% response rates, which were pretty good compared to what most people get, because of the way we write our copy and the way we do our kind of philosophy around email, cold emails is a little bit different. And so it was a little bit more effective, still only getting 12 to 15%. And I was like, man, that sucks. But when we started reaching out to people, asking them to be a guest on our podcast, we were getting 80% reply rates. And I was blown away. I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm literally connecting with my ideal clients like 80% of the time. This is insane. And all I had to do was launch a podcast as an excuse to like reach out to somebody.
Wow.
And so we did that for a couple months. It ended up our service offering didn't end up working out with that particular vertical. But so I actually decided, I said, hey, we're just going to switch our entire business model. We'd been doing this content writing thing for a year, and I was like, you know what, my margins are it's tough. These like I'm charging $175 for a blog post, and I'm just not getting the volume to really make this make sense. And so we had kind of hit a plateau with our MRR, and I thought, man, if we just switch our entire model and we start producing these podcasts for B2B companies, it positions our clients now to reach out to their ideal clients and create these relationships that can ultimately drive real revenue. And so I think that's gonna bleed into what we're going to talk about today. But that's kind of a background on Sweetfish and how we got to the point where we're doing what we're doing now. Wow,
that's awesome. I mean, so many questions there. Just one that came to mind was when you started B2B Growth. I mean, it seems like you've got a good following there and a big listener base. I mean, how have you been marketing that podcast?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kyle, because a lot of our clients, they'll ask like, they're like, podcast can't be effective because, if we don't have an existing audience, or how do we grow our listener base? And honestly, when we started this thing, we knew I had learned from our first podcast that audience size for how we're using the podcast, audience size is really I don't want to say completely irrelevant, but it just isn't the core reason why we're doing it. We're doing it because we want to connect with awesome folks like you, and with like awesome like VP of sales, VP of business development, like our ideal clients, and then also connect with guys like you that are leaders in your space, and it led to an opportunity to get to talk on your show, and like so just we want to create strategic relationships with thought leaders, influencers, decision makers, and a podcast is our way to do that. And so if just our mom and my grandma is listening to B2B Growth, it's still work. It's still effective. We still get to meet the folks that we want to meet. But I think one of the things that has led to our show gaining in popularity the way it has is it's an interview-based show, and we set our listeners up to share that show or to share their specific episode with their listeners. So we email every single guest and let them know when their show goes live, and then we actually send a kind of pre-written tweet, hey, if you'd like to share it, here you go. And then we repurpose a lot of our content into blog posts, and then we share those blog posts on our blog, on Medium, on LinkedIn. And then we also notify our guests when they get repurposed. So each guest that we bring on the show, and now we're doing 7 episodes a week now. That's 7 different people that have networks of their own sharing our podcast with their networks. And so I think that cumulative effect has really, it's kind of the compounding effect has led to, quite a few people listening to the show now in the 4 months that it's been live.
Did you just say you do 7 episodes a week?
Yeah. We moved to a daily rhythm. It was, I guess, about a month ago. So we're trying to crank out as much content as we can and connect with as many people as we can.
Wow, that's
what
crazy.
What do you produce in your podcast? I may ask. I'm just like,
so we've actually got a very kind of systematic process. We've built a team around making sure that no one person is bearing too much of the weight. So I've got an audio engineer that all he does all day. I don't know if I was using GarageBand whenever I was doing it on my own. I'm not sure the tool he's using. But we've got kind of a systematic workflow. So as soon as the interview gets done, we send it to our copywriting team, and our copywriting team, once they're done with the copy, they send it to our audio guy. He mixes up all the audio, puts the intro, outro, all that stuff on it, and we have kind of a project manager that makes sure that everything is flowing from one stage to the next. And so that's really that kind of process and that workflow that makes our service really valuable to our clients, because we can essentially we know it so well, and we have the process refined so well because we're doing it ourselves, and we're doing it with a 7-day-a-week show. So whenever we come alongside a client and they're just doing a weekly podcast, it's like we can do a weekly podcast in our sleep at this point. Our processes and our workflow and our team defined so well.
Wow. I'm in awe. Yeah, it is. It is tough for us to do a weekly podcast. I mean, it's a lot of work, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have other people helping us though. It's me. It's basically Kevin and me. Sometimes this is what I'm in awe of a lot of stuff that you just talked about. But the one thing is just the lead volume of like you need to have enough outreach and just contacts and relationships. Like, how do you find 7 new guests that are actually worth talking to?
That's a great question. That's a great question. So one of the things that I think that I'm really proud of that we did, we have a very we formalized a process for essentially like a sales development process. So you hear a lot of people in our space, the B2B sales space, talk about SDRs, sales development reps, and we use Upwork, which is a place where you can find kind of international labor at more affordable rates. We're a startup still, so we're not venture backed. We're bootstrapping this thing, and so we have very specific criteria for who we're looking for. So looking for VP of sales, VP of business development, VP of sales and marketing. At companies in 3 specific industries, and so we basically give that criteria to our SDRs and say, hey, every week we need a list of 120 people that match this criterion, and then they're logging it in a spreadsheet that we share. It says, okay, this week we're doing VP of sales in Chicago in this industry, and here's the list. And so then we use another tool called Connector from the guys at contentmarketer.io, and we send 1-to-1 emails out that come from our Google accounts, but it's software sending it. So we're not having to sit behind our laptops and send 120 emails. And then basically we're just responding to those requests. And this is the kind of the secret sauce in this whole strategy, is that you're just trying to get someone to respond to you. And so I think that's where a lot of B2B sales teams, that's where a lot of, agencies that are doing their own outreach, I think they miss. I know I'm getting emails every day from folks that do web design and stuff. And a lot of times they're overseas, and the messaging is just, they try to spell out everything they do in the first email. And I just ignore it because it's useless to me. But if someone were to shoot me an email and say, hey, James, see what you're doing with Sweetfish, I'd love to have you on my show, I'd absolutely respond like, oh yeah, sure, I'd love to be on your show. And then from that point forward, I would have an actual relationship with them. And then once I have that relationship with them, they're now in a position to actually sell me on their web design service or their, whatever the service is that their agency sells, because they've got a real relationship. They were patient. They put in the work to actually create a legitimate relationship. And that's what where I think, the bulk of, I think what we're going to be talking about today is how agency owners can use a similar strategy to connect with their ideal customers.
That's awesome. This reminds me of Kevin, because Kevin has a big background in sales, and he's when we used to run our agency together, he was the primary business development lead.
Nice.
And Kevin's really good at nurturing relationships. Kind of does it, especially where a lot of our clients were local. It would be more kind of going out to local events, and maybe you can talk more to that, Kevin. But it almost sounds like if your client base isn't local, maybe they are, but if they aren't, there's got to be another way that you can nurture those leads and provide value to them in a way that's not just you selling them.
Yeah, exactly. We use a tool called Contactually. We actually interviewed one of the co-founders on B2B Growth, and really, I mean, their whole mindset behind their company is just that relationships matter, and that you should, and they built a tool that basically helps you cultivate those. So we can put all of our guests that have appeared on our show into a specific bucket in Contactually. And I can say, hey, I want to follow up with these people every 60 days. And so every 60 days I get a reminder, and then it's just a lot of times, Kyle, it's just like doing the hard work of going, man, how can I actually add value to this person? I'm a contributor for the Huffington Post, and so maybe I could write a post that features a quote from them or features their episode, and so that could be a way that I could add value. Maybe there's another guest that I had on the show that I could connect them with, and by making that introduction, maybe it turns into business, maybe it turns into a good partnership or referral relationship, whatever that may be. And I think just thinking through, man, how can I really add value to each relationship that I'm creating? When that's your mindset, you're going to close new business. I mean, I'm sure that's why, Kevin probably crushed it in his role with your agency, is because he was looking to add real value to people.
Mm-hmm. And you were interested in people, right, Kevin?
Yeah, genuinely interested in, I've been an entrepreneur most of my career and, done a lot of different things. So usually I find a connection with people and I can understand and relate to what they're going through.
Yep, exactly.
And actually, you touched on the fact that you have contributed to the Huffington Post. I know also Business Insider, these very big, popular websites. I'm going to go out on a limb and assume you use the same strategies in terms of nurturing relationships with the right people in order to get accepted as a writer and a contributor for them.
Yeah. So we've started another podcast. Actually, we're just all in on this podcast for relationship building strategy. And so our other podcast is called The Content Marketing Show. And the managing editor for our show actually produces the Content Marketing Show for us. And so her entire strategy is reaching out to folks that are managing editors or directors of marketing for these large blogs, and featuring them on the Content Marketing Show, and then leveraging that relationship, really like trying to add as much value as we can to them, and then going in and seeing if there's a way for us to contribute on their blog. And so in the month that we have been doing that podcast, it's led to several more. So in addition to Huffington Post and Business Insider, and now it's Social Media Examiner, and we're going to be posting on OpenView, which is a big B2B sales blog. And so this whole mentality of maybe it's a podcast, maybe there's some other way that you can figure out, but I think the mindset of how do I reverse engineer creating a real relationship with someone instead of just trying to go straight to their throat with selling them something. And I think if people grasp that, it'd be a game changer.
I've never heard the terminology reverse engineering in sales. I love it. It's great, a great way to think about it.
Yep.
Yeah, there's so much there that you're not even just you're using the podcast for yourself and what you teach your clients in a sales context. But I mean, really, what you're talking about is influencer outreach and relationship building, link building. Because really, obviously, if you make a relationship with an influencer and they mention you or they link to your site on their blog, then you get that backlink that's so valuable for SEO. So it really, it sounds like it goes beyond sales, but even just all the benefits that an influencer gives you.
Exactly. When we're selling it, when our sales team is on the phone with a prospect, we try to focus. The primary benefit is this is going to lead to closed deals because folks we're going after, that's what they care about. But when we start to touch on this is going to lead to closed deals, but in addition to that, this is just going to fuel a content creation machine for you that is going to get backlinks. It's going to open up doors with influencers. There's so many side benefits in addition to the fact that you're connecting with your ideal clients, and the content you're creating. It's not just content that you've thought of in your that you and your internal team go and lock yourself in a room and you're brainstorming a content strategy. No, the content that you're writing is actually coming from the mouths of your ideal customers. So the fact that your content your content strategy is fueled by the exact people that you're wanting to sell to because they're coming up with the topics. I don't come up with any of the topics for B2B growth. When I reach out to guests to say, hey, is there, we allow our guests to come up with the topic based on their background and experience. So when I'm talking to a VP of sales and he's telling me, about this issue that he had when he just tried scaling his sales team and it failed. Well, when we talk about the why it failed, well, I know that if that VP of sales had that problem scaling a sales team, there's probably other VP of sales out there that are having the same issue. And we turn that into we turn his episode into a mega blog post. It ends up on the first or second page of Google. He's looking at, how do I how do I scale a sales team? And now all of a sudden we've got a piece of content that's going to bring him into our, into our world a bit, and hopefully get him consuming our content and eventually, connect with him so that he can become a client as well. So there's just like, you're building one-to-one relationships that hopefully lead to new business. Then you're also creating content that's attracting your ideal clients. And hopefully by getting them into your content, you can eventually do business with your listeners as well.
So James, you had talked to me before about kind of a strategy for agency owners. So a lot of our listeners are owners or managers of small to mid-sized agencies, and a lot of these companies have local client bases. So they don't do a lot of work, selling across the country or to other countries. They kind of stick mostly to servicing like web design development or marketing to their local audience. Can they use kind of the strategies you talked about with podcasts? Could they use that to their own advantage locally?
Absolutely. That's a great question, Kyle. I'm actually itching to bring a client on board to do something like this, going after a local market. We've got somebody that's interested in doing it right now, that's actually in Orlando, because I think it can be wildly effective, because coupled with the fact you can now, like, I think a theme for the show, for an agency owner could be something like, if you live in Chicago, you could easily do a show called, Business in Chicago, or, like something along, like themed in that way. And then what that does is that positions you to now reach out to every business owner, or, whoever your kind of, whoever the decision maker is for you, in your context and what you're selling, reach out to them and say, hey, I'd love to feature you on my podcast, Business in Chicago. Would you be up for it? Well, that's a really novel and unique ask, that of the hundreds of emails that they're getting in their inbox every day or every week, they're probably not getting asked to be on a podcast about, what, business is like in Chicago. And so I think it can be wildly effective for opening doors with folks in your backyard, that otherwise, you'd have to go to a, chamber of commerce, or you'd have to, be knocking on doors, doing a lot of kind of peddling locally, to meet and greet. And that's a great strategy too. Like that's not effective, but this is a way that, that you can really kind of scale that without even leaving your home, and still connecting with people that are right in your backyard.
Well, and the great thing is that if they're local, you can have them over to your office to record. You don't even have to be a remote podcast.
Yep, exactly. You can do it remote for sure, but you can absolutely, that's a great idea, man. I mean, bring like, hey, yeah, we do all of our recording here. The client that is talking to me right now, or the prospect that's talking to me right now about doing it, that's exactly what they're wanting to do. Is they're wanting to bring in kind of community influencers, people that own businesses, people that run companies in our local area, and bring them into their office and interview them right there. And by doing that, obviously, I mean, you're saturating that person with your brand in a big way, because they're coming to you. And it's just not, again, it's just this novel thing, like, oh man, I get to be on a podcast. And so, yeah, I think it could be insanely effective for an agency owner, and just for us. I mean, going back to the fact, like we mentioned, like how you can add $1 million to your pipeline in less than 90 days, just to kind of come full circle on that. That's exactly what we did. I mean, within 75 days of us launching B2B Growth, we had $1.2 million in our sales pipeline. Now for us, our service is, it's $3,500 a month now. And so to work with us, it's, just over $42,000 annually for us to produce a podcast for you. And so, you stack up, okay, if we're reaching out to specific people to be on our show, they're agreeing, they're on our show. Well, they don't know it, but now they're in our funnel now. Like, we know that as soon as their episode goes live, we're going to send them a link to the episode, and shoot them a link if they want to share it. And then a week after that, we're going to let them know, hey, we repurposed your episode into a blog post. And then a week after that, we're going to initiate the sales conversation with them and say, hey, so-and-so, was thinking about you guys today, and have you ever thought about doing a podcast for, leveraging a podcast for business development? And based on that conversation, we hop on a sales call and see what it looks like for us to work together. But it's a very organic, it's a very natural way to do sales, because I'm never on a sales call with somebody that doesn't already know, like, and trust me, because I built that credibility through the podcast by having this time, like what we're having right now. We did our podcast, a few weeks ago on our show, and now we're doing it here again. And like, it's an opportunity for us to create a real relationship. And that's exactly what agency owners can do as well.
And a very authentic way to create that relationship.
Yep.
So let's just kind of, if you don't mind, I want to walk through a scenario and get your feedback. I mean, I don't expect you to have all the answers right off the cuff, because we didn't prepare this. But just to give agency owners a sense for how they should start thinking about this strategy. Yeah. So when we ran our company Headspace, we mainly did web design, UX. So we'd built websites or applications for clients, and we might have done some marketing, but mainly our core business was around design and development. And we didn't have really a core vertical that we went after. We really should have, because it would have helped us probably grow more. And that's a lesson that we talk about a lot on this show. And we always kind of preach this to agency owners, is find your niche, right? And go after that. Don't try to shotgun it. So we actually had a lot of clients at our old agency that were in the health space. We didn't really design it that way, but like we had one biomedical device. They were a company that made this like rapid HIV testing. We had the
mental health.
Yeah, teen mental health. We had the cardio society or something like that. So we had all these clients that seemed to be touch on medical and health, not by design, to just coincidence. But then we started thinking, well, maybe this is a vertical we should go after. If this is like the kind of clients that we want, the work is good, they pay, they're good to deal with, let's go after them. So if a company came to you like that and said, okay, now how would we take this idea of using a podcast to nurture those leads and grow the business? What are maybe some ideas that they could think about to start with in terms of how to move forward?
So if you're going after that, a specific vertical, you can always brand the show around the industry. So we've got a client, he's a motivational speaker, and he's trying to get into universities all over the country, because he that's how he makes his living, is speaking in universities. And so for him, around the industry, we branded the show. So his show is called the Student Activity Show. And so he reaches out to student activities directors at colleges from all over the country and says, hey, so-and-so, I see what you're doing at University of Wisconsin. I'd love to have you on our podcast, the Student Activity Show. Are you interested? Most of them say yes. And now he has a relationship with the exact person that's going to hire him to bring him on. So in the health context, I don't know that space real well. I'd have to, look into it, but, it would, it would be something like that, whatever the high level industry name would be, the healthcare show, or, that's, it would need to be more specific than that, but that's kind of the idea there. So that's one direction you can go, Kyle. The other one you can go, way you can go is around a specific role. So, we had, when I say we do niche podcasts, like I'm not kidding. So one of the first shows that we produced was a show called the Senior Living CEO Show. And this client, they did, they sold to senior living healthcare facilities, and specifically the CEOs were the person that they found was the decision maker for bringing in their kind of consulting service. Oh, wow. And so branded a show, the Senior Living CEO Show. And now they're positioned to reach out to CEOs of people in the senior living healthcare space. So you can go role, or you can go industry in general. So if maybe you don't have a very clear, maybe the role of the person that's buying your service isn't clear. Maybe sometimes you're selling to a marketing director, and sometimes you're selling to an owner, and sometimes it's a COO or whatever. Then maybe you go industry. with how you brand the show. But if not, if man, it's very specific. Every time the CEO is the one selling it, then you brand it after the specific role. We just are launching another show soon called the PR Executive, and so this is a reputation management, kind of an SEO agency that specializes in reputation management. And so by them doing a show called the PR Executive, they now get to reach out to these PR firms and the executive, any executive. So whether it's a COO, CEO, VP of strategy, whatever the case may be, because we've branded the show in such a way, they can now reach out to multiple people at a PR firm and hopefully build a relationship so that they can start getting referral business from all of these PR agencies that they're connecting with. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, that's brilliant. I've always found it hard back in the past to think about content, because I think every agency should be coming out with content and creating value. And you can see the agencies that do really well, that are becoming thought leaders, like the Jeffrey Zeldmans of the world. They're very few and far between, because they're kind of making content for other agency owners or for other designers or developers, which is really cool, and it can build you a big following, but it doesn't really necessarily get you clients until you get to that position of thought leader, where even the clients outside that industry know who you are because you're kind of a big name. So it's always hard. You look at a lot of agency blogs, and they're very, 9 times out of 10 when I see them, they can be very, very dry, very too much focused on, if it's a marketing agency, they just talk about marketing, but it's not really targeted to anything. And I think this is a good strategy where, where they can invite somebody on their show to create content that's, it's targeted to that client. It's not just spouting off around like new design trends for 2016. You know what I mean? Yep,
exactly. Yeah, man. That's I think what's so, like, just one facet of this strategy that's so impactful, because if you're bringing on people that you ultimately want to do business with, your ideal client, and you're letting them guide the conversation and say what they want to talk about based on struggles they've recently overcome, or things that they're learning, things that are top of mind for them right now. If it's top of mind for them, it's probably top of mind for other folks. It baffles me every time I ask a guest, like, hey, we allow each guest to come up with their own topic. What would you like to talk about? They say things that I'm like, I didn't even know that was a thing. But it's, it becomes one of our most popular episodes because people in that space. I'm not a VP of sales. I own a business, and so I don't talk the same lingo. I don't know the same things. I'm not studying the same things as VP of sales are, even though I sell to them. And so by doing this now, I'm way more educated. I can talk like them even more with every VP of sales that I talk to, on the show. I'm becoming more and more educated. My lingo, my verbiage, my knowledge is shaped more and more around who my target, my ideal customer is. But then it's so from so many different angles, Kyle, man, it can work for you. So yeah.
That's awesome, James. Thank you so much for that. I think our listeners are going to get a ton of value out of that, and definitely should give it a try. If they want some help with it, and they want to learn more about Sweetfish, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so they can go to sweetfishmedia.com. We've got a really simple kind of contact form on there, or you can just shoot me an email, james@sweetfishmedia.com. If they're agency owners and they're selling to other businesses, which they are, they can check out our show as well. So it's B2BGrowthShow.com. They can find it on iTunes, or just go to b2bgrowthshow.com and subscribe there, and they can see all the content that we're putting out. And if they want to see kind of how it's how it's being done, and what we're practitioners of this strategy ourselves. So we're not just doing it for our clients, we're doing it for ourselves. And so those are the ways that I would love for your audience to stay connected with us.
That's awesome.
Yeah, really, it was great. One of my faves. You got a lot out of that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, James. And we'll post some links in the show notes as well. But everybody should check out your site, and amazing sales strategy. I think everybody should try. So thank you.
Love it. Awesome, guys. Well, this has been a blast, and we'll definitely have to stay connected.
Oh, for sure.
Sounds great, James. Thanks.
Love it. All right. Thanks, guys.
All right. See ya. Have a great day. Happy Friday.
Thank you. You too.
All right, bye.
James Carbary. Good man. Good voice, too.
He does.
Smoky with a hint of velvet.
Yeah, you can tell he's in the biz.
Yeah, actually, I saw you taking notes during that interview.
Yep.
And then afterwards, we came up with a whole bunch of new ideas.
I mean, how many podcasts do I take notes on? I mean, I do get a lot out of the podcasts, lots of them, but this was good for our business.
This was actionable.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I hope you guys enjoy that, and I hope somebody out there tries it. And if you do try it, email us and let us know if it worked. You can, of course, always email Kevin or me at kevin@proposify.biz or kyle@proposify.biz. And let us know if you want to be a featured guest on the podcast, or if you know somebody else who does and you want to make an intro. We would love to have that. Other than that, we'd love it if you rate and review us on the iTunes store. And you have a great weekend.
Later.
And we will.